Welcome back to another week of Honey from the Word. Thank you for joining me. Today's devotion is titled, When You Wonder If God Even Cares, from Exodus chapter 3, verses 7 and 8. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. For I know their sorrows. So I've come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up from that land to a good and large land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to a place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. Do you ever wonder if God really cares about you? After all, God's busy running the universe. He doesn't have time for little old me. I know he may care about me in the big picture, but does he really care about my problems and my situation? Well, let me assure you today that he does care about you. There may come a time when you find yourself desperate for answers that make sense out of the chaos your life has become. But in the midst of your pain and your confusion, never let life take away from you the certainty that God knows you, cares for you, and he's committed to you. You're not alone. You never have been, and you never will be. The Lord is with you, and he is concerned about you and committed to you. Let's give you some background for this devotion this morning. In the preceding verses, Moses is tending sheep for his father-in-law in Midian, which was on the far side of the wilderness, after fleeing from Egypt for some 40 years prior. God spoke to Moses out of the burning bush, a bush which was on fire but not consumed. Though the bush burned with fire, it did not crackle or diminish. No leaf curled and no branch charred. It burned but was not consumed. Out of this flame, the angel of the Lord speaks, declaring God's intent to liberate Israel from their slavery in Egypt. So in the first part of this speech, God identifies himself referring to Moses' Jewish ancestors. Here, the Lord's statement speaks of the suffering of the Jewish people in Egypt. Symbolically, God says that he sees, hears, and knows the plight of Israel. It's been said that the life of Moses can be divided into three equal segments. 40 years in the Pharaoh's court, becoming somebody. 40 years in the wilderness, discovering that he is a nobody. And 40 years finding out how God can take a nobody and make a somebody out of him. Moses is coming to the end of the second stage of his life. His 40 years watching sheep in the wilderness is coming to an end. I want you to notice that they are in the middle of their bondage when the Lord speaks these words to Moses. It's in the middle of our bondage, the middle of whatever we may be going through, that the Lord will many times speak to us. Whatever it is that you may be going through today, be assured that God is right there in the middle of it. And he is ready to speak to you as you're going through whatever it is. So I want to encourage you to stop and listen as he speaks to you today. First thing we notice, we see in verse 7, he says, I have seen. Isaiah 38:5 says, I have seen your tears. The enemy, Satan, sometimes seeks to deceive us by making us think that God doesn't see. It's when we are in the midst of suffering or difficulties that we wonder if God even sees what we're going through. Psalms 94 and verse 9 says, He that planted the ear, shall he not hear? He that formed the eye, shall he not see? The New Living Testament says, is he deaf, the one who formed you, your ears? Is he blind, the one who formed your eyes? The word ra'o, ra'iti, R-A-H-O, and then R-A-I-T-I means see and I have seen. This phrase isn't saying that all of a sudden he noticed the oppression, but rather that he had continually seen the oppression. In other words, there was never a time that he did not know what was going on in their lives. His eyes had not been inattentive to their plight, but the fullness of time had not arrived. Second thing is in verse 7, I have heard. Isaiah 38:5 says, I have heard your prayer. 1 Kings 9:3 says, I have heard your prayer. God not only sees, but he also hears. In a world that seems to not be listening, our God is always listening. All creatures with ears have a range of hearing. That is, there are sounds which are too low or too high for our ears to receive. Dogs, for example, can hear sounds that are pitched so high that humans cannot hear them. There are actually dog whistles which you can use to call your dog, but when you blow the whistle, you'll not even be able to hear the sound that it makes. Interestingly, there is no sound so low or so high that God cannot hear it. God always hears our cry. The third thing is in verse 7, I know or I understand. The afflictions of the Hebrews were known to the Lord. He knows your sorrows. He understands what you're going through. The expression, I know their sorrows, implies understanding and comprehension, which must then include feeling, compassion, and even a tender desire to help. His knowledge is something more than man's mere knowledge of the fact. He sees the beginning and the end of an event at once. He knows all about our sorrows, how they came, and he knows about how and when and why all this is going on in your life. He has a different vantage point than you and I. Fourth thing I notice here is in verse 8, I have come. I have come down to deliver you. This is a statement evoking the image of a powerful king coming off of his throne in order to demonstrate his power. It helps when someone says, I know the great sorrow that you're going through, but there's nothing like saying, I have come beside you to help you. The fifth thing I notice here is in verse 8, I will bring them. He's getting ready to bring you into a brand new season. In other words, I have come to bring you out of this old season and bring you into a new season. He has come today to change the circumstances that are in your life. He came to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up to a good and broad land, to the place of the Canaanites. And he was about to send Moses to Pharaoh to bring them forth to a good and large land, it says. The actual size of the land promised to Abraham is much larger than they possessed most of their history. Only a very brief time did they possess the entire land of promise. It includes all of where Israel is today, Gaza, the Golan Heights, through Syria, and all the way up to the Euphrates. You as a church have been living in small confines in the sense of being small, but understand today the Lord is about to bring you to a large, broad, fertile land, a time of flourishing like you have never seen or experienced to this point. Psalms 118 verse 5 says, I called on the Lord in distress. The Lord answered me, and he set me in a broad place. When you don't think he cares, understand he does care for you.